Welcome to the Budget Mom YouTube channel. I'm Kamiko Love from thebudgetmom.com, and today I am sharing with you my process of starting my first garden, but not only that, how I'm budgeting and preparing to spend for something that's very new in my life. I have never done a garden before. I don't really know what to expect as far as expenses or the outcome or the process. I have spent months researching on how to garden, and now I am taking the knowledge that I do have and I am applying action to it, and I'm actually going to do my first garden this year. The reason I am sharing this video today is because I have an ultimate goal to be 100% self-sufficient with seasonal fruits and veggies in my life. This will play a role in my food budget and ultimately how much I'm spending on produce. And if you are like me and you're saying, Miko, I would also like to start planting or growing my most consumed and favorite fruits and veggies, today I'm going to be showing my garden space, but to start this journey, you really don't need a full, large spot or place to start a garden. For many years, what this looked like in my life is I would do container planting. So for instance, last year we started with cherry tomatoes that were in a pot on my deck. It took up very little space, and all I really needed to do was go buy the starter plants from Home Depot. So you can really start this process with limited space if that's what you are also wanting to do. I think another thing is that I want to mention, for my journey on this process, the Old Farmer's Almanac online has been by far the most helpful resource and source of knowledge on this garden journey of mine. And I'm just showing you all of those tools here in a minute. I'm also going to be documenting, because I've never done this before, how do you start to budget? How do you create a budget when you don't even know what to expect? I'm going to be going into that as well. Also, I think it's important to mention, I've been hesitant to start gardening because there were things and words that really scared me. Like when I was looking at gardening and they were talking about the pH level in your soil or composting or any of that, I got really like, ooh, I don't know if I can start that. But I am taking the knowledge that I do have without being an expert on all of those things, and I'm just going to take action and do it. So it's important, if you are learning or researching about gardening, don't get hung up on those words that are scary. All of that you can learn as you go, and I'm really approaching this as a trial and error type of process. So let me show you my garden and a few tips to get started. All right, so this is my dedicated garden space. I decided to use horse trough raised beds. The garden shed were all put in when I bought the house a couple years ago. The only thing that we did recently was fill these raised beds. Now the raised beds are, like I said, are horse troughs. You can get used ones on places like Facebook Marketplace for a very affordable price. You can build your own raised beds from recycled pallets. This is just my setup. Now, the reason I want to show you my garden space is because this is the first thing that I did. I chose where I wanted my garden so I could sit back and observe. Right now, it's about 10 o'clock in the morning. You can see my garden is getting full sun. I wanted to observe how much sun my garden was going to get. So that's one of my first tips. You have to decide where you want your plants to live so you can sit back and observe and know and see how much sun your garden is getting, because you don't want to plant sun-loving vegetables in shade, right? I also want to determine where the sun rises and where the sun sets. That also plays a role based on where might be some shade in my garden. So that's the first step. The next step is to figure out and to know what hardiness zone you are in. That's number 2. And what I mean by that is planting based on your frost dates. So why is it important to know your hardiness zone? It's important because it's going to determine when you're going to plant your spring fruits and veggies or your spring garden and your fall garden if you're going to be doing a rotation type scheduled garden like I am. It also is going to let you know what fruits and veggies grow best in your hardiness zone. I got that information from the Old Farmer's Almanac online, almanac.com. I'll put that resource down in the description below. So that was the second thing I had to do. What are my frost dates? When can I begin planting? And what things grow best where I live? The third thing I had to do was figure out what containers or where I'm going to be planting my plants and figure out the best way to water and drain those things. So let me show you very quickly kind of how I decided to fill up my raised beds. Okay, so for these raised beds, what we did is the first probably 4 to 7 inches is drainage rock. On top of that drainage rock, we put a weed fabric, and on top of the weed fabric, we put some garden soil mixed with Miracle-Gro garden soil. So it has great nutrients. These are ready to plant in. Next, I had to figure out how am I going to water my garden. So each one of my raised beds is hooked up to a water source. So this is actually hooked into my sprinkler line and my well. So we are doing a drip line type of watering system in all of my raised beds. And the reason I decided to do watering at the soil level is because when you have water being sprayed on top of your fruits and veggies, for some of them, it can cause different funguses or diseases. So from what I have understood, watering at the soil level is best. And these are also controlled, meaning I can turn off or on the water based on what I have planted in each one of these raised beds. Okay, so we're back inside now. Now, anytime I am starting something new, either learning a new skill or starting a new hobby, I kind of tackle it in 3 different steps. Number 1 is research, number 2 is planning, and number 3 is organization. So organization meaning through that planning and research, all of those notes and thoughts and everything that I learned, getting it into an organized way where I can apply those action steps or that information in my life. So it's putting everything I learned into action steps that I'm then going to implement into my life. So right now I'm going to be showing you a top view of what that research, planning, and organization looks like. And I'm also going to be sharing my computer screen to share with you one of the most helpful online tools I have found during this process. So let me show you what I have going on my kitchen table. All right, so to help with this planning process, I started myself just a little 3-ring binder of all of the information that I've learned for starting my first garden. So if I open this up, inside of this binder, I have a couple of different things. The first thing is I ended up doing a full garden plot plan. Now this is to scale, and this is something that I made for my own personal use. I have not made these available yet. I'm still working on the process if I want to make these available, but this is what I have used. Having a garden plot plan and figuring out on your research, based on your hardiness zone, what things grow best where you live, and deciding what fruits and veggies you want to plant. Now, this was based off what we as a family absolutely love eating. I didn't want to plant anything that was going to go to waste or things that we weren't going to love. That's another tip. You have to figure out what are the things that you absolutely love. What are the fruits and veggies that you constantly buy over and over, the things that you gravitate towards? That's what I would include in your garden. So my garden plot plan is I just drew out to scale each one of my raised beds, like the ones I showed you outside, and then what I wanted to plant inside each one of those raised beds and around. So anything that you plan on planting. And so this is what my garden plot plan looks like. I have a little key for what each one of these little things represents. And then I created a seed and plant tracker. Now, because this is my first garden and I kind of made this last minute decision to take action, I'm having to start this first spring garden with a lot of starter plants, meaning that these have already been seeded. They have already grown into small little plants that I can then just transplant into my raised beds. Next year, it's my goal to start a lot of these, most of these, from seeds by starting them indoors before my first frost date. So this year, I know it might be a little more expensive than say next year because I'm starting with all of these starter plants. But my seed and plant tracker is what I want to plant, what type it is. Is it a herb, a veggie, a flower, a fruit? Whether I'm starting with seeds or starters, the best time to plant those specific fruits and veggies according to my hardiness zone and any planting notes I have about that. I also included my harvest window. So when do I harvest these types of fruits and veggies? And these are blank. So I want to track the date I planted these and when I started harvesting them. So this is for me to fill out as I'm going along. I mean, you can always go by what you're told online, but I want to know based off my own experience exactly my location where I am. How do these dates align with what I'm finding online? Now these are for my garden plot plan, and my seed and plant tracker are for my spring of 2022 garden. I also plan to do a fall garden, not this year though. For me, this year is about trial and error, take action and observe. So this is my year of learning and observing and seeing what works best, what could I do better, what are some things maybe I didn't know, and then transitioning next year into a spring-fall rotation with my garden. Now, another thing that I did, this has to do with that research, planning, and organization. I researched everything that I wanted to plant, from every veggie, every fruit, and from what I found online and all the things that I thought, oh man, that's really helpful, I wanted to put them into really quick reference sheets. I made these for myself using Canva, and basically it's when to sow, plant, harvest, spacing that you need, the different type of variety that I might be doing, when, the planting, the growing, any harvesting notes or any notes that I am taking. Now I did this for each and every single thing that I am planting, because if I'm out there and I plant and I go to harvest my onions and I'm like, I don't know how to harvest these things, I don't know what I'm doing, then I can go to my harvesting notes, the things that I researched for this specific veggie. I can go to these harvesting notes while I'm outside and say, okay, this is how I do that. Because remember, this is coming from someone who does not know anything about this. So I did that for every single thing that I'm planting, and they're just really great reference sheets because I'm going to be planting these same things pretty much every single year. So having these reference sheets in my binder will be really helpful. Before creating, my little plot plan that I just drew out, the Old Farmer's Almanac online has a free 7-day trial, absolutely 100% free, where you can actually put in the computer your garden area. And if you don't have a garden, maybe just the size of the containers that you are using. This is to scale. The most wonderful thing about this tool is after drawing out each one of your little containers or raised beds, you can pick from all these fruits and veggies, put it into the program right where you want it, and it will tell you how much of that specific fruit or veggie fits in that exact space. Not only that, what works well planting together. So why is companion planting important? Because sometimes when you grow certain things together, it can act as a defense against certain pests. So like peppers and carrots are good to grow together. Corn is by itself here, but I have bush beans and potatoes. Those grow really well together. I have a full container for my lavender, a full container for my strawberries, because the program told me, Miko, you need this entire space to fit 4 different lavender plants. Miko, you need this much space to do 3 different strawberry plants. So, and then I'm doing blueberries and raspberries against the fence on each side, and I'm doing sunflowers back by my garden shed. It's just a very helpful tool when it comes to the planning aspect. Once you know what grows well in your zone and exactly what you want to plant, being able to put it onto a plot like this. But the best thing, when you're done having your plot done, it gives you an entire garden list. Tells you you need 3 different basil plants. Or if you're buying it in seeds, it will tell you how many seed packets. You need 21 carrot plants. You need 3 cilantro plants. So I'm starting, remember, there are some things that I can do by seed, but a lot of these, because I'm making this last minute decision, I didn't get time to do my seeds inside, I'm gonna be starting from starter plants. So this is just, it tells you too when to plant, when to harvest each and every single thing that you end up putting on your garden plot. So that's really helpful, and me showing you that program here in a minute. Now let's talk about the budgeting and spending and financial aspect of this garden. People ask me all the time, Miko, does it really save you money by growing your own fruits and veggies at home? It depends. When you are using a garden and you're wanting to save money, say on your grocery budget from not buying those specific fruits and veggies at the stores, what it comes down to is the cost to build and grow that garden versus your yield. You want to keep your garden costs low and your yield high. So how am I working into my budget, since I kind of made this last minute decision? I didn't really have any garden money saved or put aside. One of the things that I did, and what I have decided to do, is usually I budget $100 every single month for my Disport appointments. I had $422 in here for my next Disport appointment. So it's rearranging, tweaking, reprioritizing things in my life. I'm going to skip my next Disport appointment, and instead I'm going to spend that money on starting my first garden. So I am reallocating what I had saved for this Disport priority, and I'm now using that for my first garden. So you can see on my spending tracker, I took $300 out of this savings fund, which brought me down to $122 for my Disport goal, and now a new garden budget. So I have my spending tracker in here. I have my $300 that I moved from my Disport goal, and now I have $300 sitting in here for my new garden budget for garden spending. I'm not going to be planting my garden till around May 15th, so I have April to also save and plan as well. So on my April budget, I got rid of my Disport, and instead I'm throwing that $100 towards my garden just for the month of April, which is going to give me a total budget to start my new garden of $400. And since I have never, usually I'll say create your budget based on what you are really spending. That's how you create a realistic budget. But what happens when you have no real spending to reference? I've never spent any money like on a garden like this before. I have no spending to reference or to go off of. So this is my first year figuring it out. With this example and in this instance, it's really important that spending is not what determines my budget. My budget determines my spending. I know I have $400 to spend for this garden. Once that $400 is gone, no more spending. This is what I have to start this. And so I created a garden cost planner. I'm going to write out what I am buying, the category, whether it's an herb, a veggie, a fruit, where I bought it, how much of it I bought, when I bought it, the cost of each one of those, and then the total cost and any notes as I am spending. This is important because this is my reference on how much this might cost me next year. When I do this process next year, I'll have spending to reference to create a realistic budget. But right now, so I'm gonna go and start buying items. Mainly, I don't need soil because that's already established. I don't need any of the tools, I don't believe. I have a shovel, I have other gardening tools, small gardening tools. Mainly what's going to be costly for me is buying those starter plants and seeds. So, and I might have to do these things year after year. So and you can see this is only for my spring of 2022 gardening budget. And I'll know too that this is my first start, right? Just like with the budget that we talk about, you tweak and perfect as you go along. But in this instance, because I have nothing to reference for my spending is not dictating my budget. My budget is dictating my spending. So if I go and I get to everything besides my tomatoes and I've spent my $400, well then guess what I'm not doing? I'm not gonna be planting my tomatoes this spring because it's not in my budget. That's a hard limit. So that's how I'm handling the budget aspect. Now let me show you my favorite online resource that I have used so far for planning my first garden online. I wanted to show you almanac.com. This is the Old Farmer's Almanac website. Now you can search right here up at the top, but what I really want to show you is where to learn what hardiness or plant zone you are in. So if you go to the top here and go to gardening and go to frost dates, you can then search by your city, state, or zip code. If you want to get more specific to your area, so I'll just put in, for instance, the zip code of the Budget Mom warehouse. So it's giving me the reference point of Felts Field, which is a nearby location. It tells me that my last spring frost is May 10th, which lets me know I can plant or start planting anything that doesn't handle frost well after May 10th. And then for my fall planting schedule, the first fall frost is October 4th. So I want to make sure that I'm harvesting anything that doesn't handle frost well before that date. And my growing season is 146 days. So that is very helpful in figuring out your frost dates. But they have a ton of free resources. The next thing I want to show you is their garden planner. Now their garden planner, you can try it for free for 7 days. You do not have to put in any credit card or payment information. It's 100% free for 7 days. And it allows you to plant out your garden by scale. So you can draw out each one of your raised beds, and it will tell you, based on what you want to plant, how much can fit in that space and what grows best next to each thing that you are wanting to plant. It's very, very helpful. And the next thing, if you go to growing guides, this has been by far the most helpful information. So you can pick out any fruits, vegetables, herbs. I'm doing a mix of vegetables, fruits, herbs, and flowers in my garden. But let's say, for instance, you want to grow beets. It will give you every single bit of information about growing beets, from the planting to the growing to the harvesting, what types of pests and diseases to look out for, and how to prevent it and how to control those diseases, recommended varieties based on your hardiness zone. And then it tells you the best way to harvest those things. So if you're like me and you don't know anything about any of this, this was really helpful for me. So those are the steps and processes I have taken to start my very first garden this year. And really, like I said, because I've never done this, this is definitely a year of taking action, observing, and trial and error. So if you found this video helpful, please like it and don't forget to subscribe.